Hi, everybody. Happy Thankful Thursday. It's Jamie, and I'm here with another of our Soul to Sisterhood Sister Goddesses. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with a woman who is not only my friend, but I also had the great pleasure of being her colleague as well. Today, we're going to talk to Jaana, and Jaana has a very interesting and very unique story of motherhood. In May 2010, she and her husband adopted their daughter from Nepal. We're going to talk about that story today, and we're also going to talk about much more because this woman comes to us with so much wisdom and so much compassion. And one of the places I want to start is Jaana and I were just talking before I hit the record button is, you know how sometimes you have those people in your life that you just feel really lucky to get to orbit around? She is definitely one of these people. And when I would work with her and even be in social situations with her, I always got so much peace watching Jaana hold others compassionately without judgment, just holding space for them to come to terms with their own feelings. And we're going to talk about some really interesting things today. And I am excited for you to get to witness Jaana doing that for all of you viewers out there, because we've got some interesting times happening externally and internally, and this woman's wisdom is going to be a nice balm on all of our souls. So I will turn it over to you. Thank you for being with us, Jaana.
Hi, thank you so much for having me and all those beautiful words. And I have to say, I feel very similar in being honored to know you as my friend and to work with you. And it's just really an honor. And so I'm so happy to be here and trying to think. I do have a daughter who I adopted from Nepal. She was 21 months when I went to Nepal to get her, and I spent a month in Nepal, which was really fun and also very nerve-wracking going through the adoption. I learned a lot, but I'm very happy to now be a mom to my wonderful daughter.
Aw. Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about becoming a mother by choice. Now, in your story, you talked that when you were younger, you saw a program that sort of planted the seed of this inspiration. Can you talk about that and kind of tell that story?
Sure, absolutely. When I was young, and I don't even know how old I was, I don't even know, it must have been some type of news story or something about this family that had adopted a, a lot of children. And most of them, I believe, if not all of them, had special needs on top of being this very large family. I think they had maybe six or more kids. And I just always was impressed by this story about this family who chose these children that, especially, they're not necessarily easy go lucky. Oh, yeah, I just have a child now. Like, they needed more work and more thought put into how can we support these children and their needs. And it just really stuck with me. And I always felt in my heart that I wanted to adopt. Um, Before we did adoption, we did also try to get pregnant, both on our own and through, we did IUI and also IVF. So we did do that and it didn't work out. And then we decided that we were just going to start putting all of our efforts into adoption. And that's where we began.
Well, you talk about in your story that you and your husband were just open to a child choosing you, and you had no prerequisites or requirements. Can you talk about what it's like to hold that sort of open space in your heart?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That definitely was part of when we started the adoption process. Part of what they do is you have a home visit with a social worker, and they come and they ask you a whole lot of questions. And they did ask us about, because they obviously, through our information we gave them, they knew that we had tried to have a baby and were not successful. And so they asked about that and if we were mourning that and if, was this a second choice? And we said, no, honestly, we always thought we would adopt and have one, is kind of what we had always thought of. And since it wasn't happening having one, we just decided to go with the, okay, we're just going to adopt now. And we never had any, we weren't upset that it wasn't never a second choice for us. It was always a first choice. And I and so I it was funny because I thought, well, why wouldn't anyone just want to welcome a child in? But I've come to understand that a lot of people are very set in being pregnant and having their own child, and I just never had that um, in me that was the only way I could be a parent. I always knew there were other options, and that whatever child came to me would be my child, no matter what.
Mm-hmm. And you even said in your interview, there were no stipulations.
No, we didn't want to pick a gender. We did choose the country, but we chose a country by what was available at the time. At the time that we chose to start our adoption, many countries were not doing adoption. And so countries that we had thought of earlier were no longer an option. And they said Nepal, and I've always held something for Nepal since I was very young. And so as soon as they said Nepal, I said, that's where I want to go. And so, but I never had it that I had to have a child who looked a certain way or was from a certain place or anything like that. But when given the option, and I think there were only a few options when I was looking, I think sort of like Russia was an option. I think China, but China was a very long wait. I think it was a 5-year wait when we were looking, and I am an older parent, so 5 years out of my life was not something I was going to do. And I don't remember, like, there were only a few countries that were, doing it. But like I said, Nepal had always held a fascination for me, and I always knew I'd go there. I just didn't realize how strong of a connection I would have to the country.
You say in your interview that you got your daughter's picture in September of 2009.
Yes.
And you didn't get to bring her home until May of 2010.
No.
So you had this connection to this baby all this time being so far away. What was that like?
So I went to Nepal in April of 2010, and I was there from April until May. So I was there for a month. And the 7 months we waited, so we started our adoption, filling out paperwork in August of 2008. Um, and then this was the only thing that we had any control of. And so we rushed our paperwork. We went through it and got everything done as quick as possible because we knew that was the only control in the situation that we would have. And so we felt like the sooner we got it done, the sooner we could get to the good stuff. And so I think the period between us getting notification that we had a child and we were matched, until I actually got to go there, was the longest 7 months of my life, because you're thinking, just why can't I just go get her now? Why am I waiting? And we were waiting on a signature. We're like, what is taking so long to sign a paper? So, it was very nice. The woman who was our liaison in Nepal was very sweet, and I don't even know if she was supposed to do this, but she did. She went and took pictures and sent pictures to us throughout that 7 months. I think we got pictures maybe once or twice. And she would go, we knew she was going to visit and checking on the children, and she would give us little updates about what was going on. But certainly that period of time was filled with anxiously waiting to just, we were part of a group online, who were all given children at the same time. all from Nepal, and we kept in touch. And so any information any one person had, we would share it within the group, and then we'd all be calling our agencies going, hey, did you know this? Do you know this? Like, what's going on? What's going on? And sometimes we were informing the agencies, they hadn't even gotten that information yet. So, it just, I think the group helped. I read a lot about adoption, especially adopting from another country, specifically because I knew those needs would be different than adopting, from the States. And so I just tried to supply as much information as possible to myself, getting her room ready, like doing the little things that we could do while we waited. But yeah, it was a long 7 months.
Gosh, I can't imagine. And as we did your interview, we talked that you took that picture around to a lot of friends and family. And one of your superpowers that I mentioned at the beginning of this is you got the opportunity to hold a lot of people in compassion as they struggled with a lot of stuff. Can you talk about that, about what that was like and how that informs your life as a mother today?
Um, yeah, it definitely is interesting, because that is definitely one of the things for me, um, that I knew to prepare for, is that having a child that is a different race, was going to be different and open up different questions. And I was going to have to prepare her. And also, I think when I first brought her home, not so much now, but when I first brought her home and she was little, I would get some really weird comments from people out in the street, like taking her around. And so, like, how to deal with that, how to deal with people's, I don't want to say prejudices, but maybe your judgments. They held something because they would comment on her color
Mhm.
specifically. And and also I had family members who were like warning me that, horrible things could happen, because I'm getting a child from these, Nepal is a very poor country. So, there could be issues with that. And, trying to not let all of that negativity pull me down, because I knew what I was doing was right for me, and to hold that, and also to realize that hopefully once they met my child, they would hopefully form a different opinion, which is actually very much what happened. My daughter has a very special ability to connect with people from the get-go, from when we first brought her home. And she makes people comfortable that aren't necessarily thinking that they might be comfortable. She's changed people. um, we've met couples who were like, I will never have children. And then they met my daughter and were like, maybe I would consider adoption now. And so that's who she is. And certainly, once my family members met her, everyone fell in love with her. So that was wonderful.
You talked about that the way that you grew up gave you this perspective of unification through diversity versus division via the difference.
Right.
And that having this sort of multicultural love and respect that you received just as much as you were able to give, that really helped you compassionately hold space for these people.
Yes. I
And
definitely, yeah, I think because of where I grew up and situations about my growing up where I was around people of different races constantly, that was just normal for me. And that I never had that, even though it was around me. Certainly my grandparents came, they were from an era that things were very much, segregated and very different. And they still held those beliefs, and yet somehow that didn't get passed on to me. I was very open, and always had friends of different races and things, and that just to me was normal. And I think I saw some of the judgment, and it was so negative, and I didn't like it, that I always wanted to be not that. I
Mhm.
didn't want to hold that judgment about anybody, and to just and I think as I've grown older and studied more and more about diversity and things, and have learned more, that also has helped shape the way I think. And I just, for example, you know, when I was younger, I would always say, well, I don't see color. Everybody is equal to me. And then, later on through classes in education, it became apparent to me that yes, everybody can be equal, but seeing their color, that is who they are, and is equally as important. And for me, I feel that needs to be respected. um, I certainly want that for me. um, Although, I am white, and so I do have that white privilege, but even still, I don't ever try to look at anybody else, and I have to confront when I do have them, because everybody has biases. We all do. It's just part of human nature. But to recognize when you have that bias, and to sort of step beyond those lines. And and so definitely, I think raising a child of color, and recognizing those things, and supporting her through her journey, so that she feels empowered in her differences, is important.
Beautifully said. And I mean, even this, what we talked about before I hit record, sort of being on top of those micro judgments that are consistently happening and being said to your daughter and to your family, and just having this open, honest conversation with her of awareness. You say in your story, your awareness was heightened. I'm bringing a girl child home, one, and I'm bringing a girl child of a different race home.
Yeah.
And with that came some really specific dedication of empowering her through honesty and awareness. Can you talk about what that's like today, having her be a middle schooler?
Yes, I know. Gosh. How did I get this far? How did she come up this far? She is I have always been very open and honest to her about the way the world sees and views, and sometimes it's not always in the best light, and that you have to rise above that to some extent, and not take it personally, because it's not personal. And how to talk to people, and how to open their minds about that, because it is important. There is one thing that has struck me, and because I've talked to people now as she's older about her, being a different race, and how best I can deal with that, and how to help her through life. I've always been very open and honest with her, when developmentally appropriate points came up, about how sometimes people of color are seen and viewed. And also, I've had to explain it to her, which I was not prepared for in first grade. She had an assignment where she was Rosa Parks, and she had to dress up like Rosa Parks. And all of a sudden, I was having to tell her about racism in America. And I was like, I wasn't quite thinking that I was going to do that so early, but here it came. And so we've always had that open conversation, that it always hasn't been the way it is. It's still not the best, but it's getting better. And we have to be vocal. Don't keep quiet about it. Speak up, because that's also important. um so I've always been honest about her. And then I've also recently talked to a friend of mine who's of color, and I've said, so, I'm very honest about it, and this and that. And this friend of mine said, well, yes, but also you just want her to be a powerful person,
Mhm.
because within that, the growth and overcoming these things that will probably happen to her at some point. um but he said, the stronger you can make her and who she is, is the best. And so maybe not always tainting it with like, well, the world may not always, view you in the best of light, and you're going to have to fight and be more vocal and open and rise above those things when those things happen to you. But also to instill her to be a powerful person in her own right. And so to be able to just have the confidence in herself that she is who she is and she loves herself, she's a great person, and to believe that. And that will also help her in those situations overcome the possible negativity or, misconstrued things that will come up, because they do, unfortunately, as we're seeing right now in our world, unfortunately.
Well, Jaana, I cannot think of a better person to be the guiding light for this beautiful young woman. And I mean, yes, absolutely. That's what we have to impart to our sons and daughters, right? That we are all empowered human beings, and we must speak up when we see something happening that is unkind, uncruel, or is cruel and unjust. And it's up to us to speak up and to protect and to come together in solidarity and in love and compassion and empathy, all of those wonderful things that you so beautifully personify with your life and your choices and your life's work. I mean, let's talk about this for a second. In your interview, and I can't wait for people to read this story of everything that you went through in that month in Nepal. But, here you are. She's 21 months old. It's been 7 months even waiting to meet her. And that moment arrives. And then you have the next couple of days as you're solidifying the adoption process, or weeks. Can you talk about what that was like for you as far as how she reacted to you?
Yeah, my story is far different from most people who are adopting from Nepal. My child, the first day that I met her, the woman who was helping take care of her, which they call Didi, her Didi came up with her, and she's got scratches on her face, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what happened to my child? Why is she all scratched? And the first day, it was for me, because I knew this, like, here she is, all of a sudden she's like with these two white women, because my mom was with me, and like we're like playing with her, and she's clearly very attached to the Didi who took care of her. And so I purposely wanted to just sort of observe and be very not like grabbing her or doing things that would like scare her off or frighten her or make her uncomfortable. And so having to like reserve myself, when of course you just want to hug and cuddle them and kiss them, and knowing that she wasn't ready for that, and being respectful of those places and allowing her to come to me as she wanted to, was part of that. And then we returned the next day, and we were at they had like a baby gate to the doorway of her room where she lived with her other peers that were in the home. And all of the children clamored over to the baby gate, and we're all, looking at us and talking. And my child took one look at my mom and I and turned tail and started running the opposite direction, screaming, "Nine, nine, 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 nine," which is no, 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 no. So, and from that day forward, every single day we visited her, I think it was 5 days, I believe, she cried the whole time we were there. She did nothing but cry. We tried taking her on walks. We tried bringing, there was another little girl in the home that was also getting adopted and coincidentally brought back to Sarasota. And so they tried to have the two girls come together, and maybe that would help my daughter. But no, nothing helped. And she cried all the time. There was a moment, I think, in the first few days where I thought, am I doing the right thing? Like, this child is clearly like, and the women who worked in the home, the DDs, were all confused. They'd never seen a child react like this. So they had no clue what to do. They were trying everything. I mean, they would bring candies with them so she could suck on candies and maybe that would help her not cry so much or be happier, and like nothing worked. And so like I said, there was a moment where I thought, oh my gosh, am I really doing the right thing? And then I had to remember my child development background and realize that I am going to give this child a better life than she would have in the home. I was going to give her a family that she wouldn't have living in a home. And that the fact that she was so connected to her Dee meant that she was capable of making healthy attachments to an adult, and that would be good for me, because that meant if she could do it with one person, she'd be able to transfer that to me and my husband. And so to remember that, and to remember all of my child development background and all of the things I learned in school, that really it was healthy, and that what I was seeing was actually not necessarily a bad thing. And certainly my child and her Dee were the most connected of the children that I saw her with. When we went to get my daughter, when she was finally able to be released and officially be adopted in Nepal, the Dee cried for my daughter. She actually threw herself out of the car, which was really, I mean, we weren't going fast. It was very slow driving, but still, it was really heartbreaking. And I tried really hard to hold it together because I didn't want her, she was already crying and upset, and I didn't want her to see me crying and upset at that moment, because I needed to be a safety. And for me to break down in those moments when she was breaking down, I didn't think would foster a good trust or relationship building. I waited until she was asleep and then I let it all out. But yeah, it was, and nobody had ever seen it. I mean, she cried the first, I think it was 3 days we had her in the hotel, inside the hotel room. When we were out in the garden and out in the world, she did a little bit better. But as soon as we were in the hotel room, she cried until she fell asleep. Basically, she just cried nonstop. And it was torturous. That my mom's taking pictures, and at one point I was like, just stop taking pictures of her crying. I don't want to remember all this. I'm like, it was torturous, but also knowing that it was going to be okay, and that it was a good thing that she was able to attach so deeply.
Yeah, what a beautiful reframe for parents, parents who are looking to adopt, or parents who are just trying to understand early childhood development and behavior, that attachment sometimes can come across looking like a negative manifestation, right, of behavior and crying, but really that's actually a compliment, that they're so capable of attaching so securely, which is what we want, right? Because we know secure attachment equals secure, healthy brain and emotional health going forward, right, into our adult relationships. One thing that you talk about, and that I really love witnessing you work as your colleague, is you really listen to children. And it's clear that you firmly believe that they have wise things to impart. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. It's very important to me that I am not above them for the most part. I often, and I think, I mean, there are times when I'm not, but I try, especially when someone's trying to get my attention and really talk to me, I want to be at their level, and I want to be eye to eye with them and make those connections, because they are so important. And I let them have the time. I don't step in and try to say the words that they're trying to say. I allow them that freedom and time to really express themselves. Because as an adult, I want someone to listen to me. Those are, I'm trying to role model those skills for them, and also allow them to feel heard. Because I think that's part of building trust and relationships, is time for listening and time for talking, and being respectful of both pieces. It's extremely important to me. And also, really knowing the child and seeing where their interests are. I definitely, in the classroom, I want to know what the child's interest in, so that I can use that to for their growth, their development. If they like trains or cars, I want to know that. So if they never go to art, then I'm going to put cars and trains or whatever in my art, so I can entice them to try something new, but with something comfortable for them. Um, it's super important. And to always, even now, my daughter sometimes is like, "Mom, I didn't finish." I have to step back and go, "Okay, I'm going to listen. It's my turn to wait," and because it is so important. And I think it's important life skill. It starts young. All of these habits and things start young. If you are doing them at an early age, then it just becomes easier as they grow up, that you're not trying to break a habit that started um, when they were young, that you didn't correct yet, and now suddenly they're 9, 10, testing behaviors, and you're like trying to correct something that you've already let go or didn't work on early on. um, is just, it's very hard. Especially at those, there are certain ages where children will be doing those testing limits, and if you do it when they're young, it's going to come back. They're still going to test you, but if you set up those limits and boundaries for them, where they know when they've stepped over them, or that that's not okay, or whatever, if that's set when they're young, it's going to hold over to when they're older. It's very hard to correct something that started young, and now suddenly you want to correct it at 9, 10, 11 years old. That it's much harder because they've had all those years gearing up to that.
Wow. I love that. Thank you so much, because that's a little bonus for all of our moms and dads who are going to watch this. I mean, really, Jaana, your approach is so rooted in respect and empathy and really love, right? And, our children are so wise, and they deserve just as much of those things as our adult relationships do. um, it's just they receive it and they give it back differently, and sometimes as adults we cannot really decipher that language, right? Because our inner child may be struggling with the exact same thing. So many opportunities to learn through love that you offer us. Thank you. And thank you for being on the forefront of teaching our children this, because we know that they are the future. So I asked you, and I just want to, you're the first interview that I've asked what you thought of your card. And before I hit record, I asked you, I said, what do you think of your Oracle card? Would you mind to share what you shared with me earlier?
Yeah, I'm happy to. When I first saw the card, and there was the words, I think it says, I would thank my younger self. And for a moment when I saw it, I thought, oh, would I really do that? Because I had a somewhat difficult upbringing. Um, and so I was like, ooh. But then I realized I really would thank myself, because I got through those things. I persevered. Um, a lot of everything that I went through shaped who I am. I think that I am as compassionate and empathetic as I am, part of because of how I grew up. And so I do think I would definitely thank myself for keeping on, and um what I went through and stuff, and to persevere and keep going and not give up, when there were times when I wanted to give up. And so I would thank myself for going through all of that. I'm honored to be where I am today, and it definitely has a lot to do with how I grew up. And certainly watching that show all those years ago and being so impressed by adoption has stuck with me. So I'm it's just interesting the way things work out. And then the other thing was the color of the card, which is red, which is also associated with your root chakra. Um, and at first I was like, oh, I don't, and then I wasn't sure if that was like, oh, is that really my color? And then the more I thought about it, I thought, no, that really is my color. I'm constantly, I feel like I am fairly grounded, and that's pretty pretty where I am, but it's also something that I have to work on too. Like I'm very conscious of being grounded. I'm trying, trying to remember that root and connection. So I think it really ended up being like the perfect card, and it's so beautiful.
Ah, thank you, sweetheart. Well, you are beautiful.
Thank you. I say the same thing back to you.
Thank you, my love. Thank you. Well, you open our eyes and our hearts to the possibilities of creating family by choice. And that in itself is just such an empowered stance for so many of us to realize that maybe we've been thinking about just opening ourselves up to a new relationship or a new way of being or a new way of caregiving. And you remind us all that we're so capable of that, no matter how scared we might feel
Yes.
or unsupported, that the support is there because it's within.
Yes. Yeah,
So thank you.
absolutely.
And thank you for being so open about your story.
I I really feel that being open and being able to talk about and sharing stories, like these things shouldn't be hidden. They should be celebrated and honored. And I'm always always open to anyone who's interested in adoption to talk to them and tell them about my process. I think for me there was a tiny bit of luck that I was a little bit or a lot naive about the way things work, and I think that worked to my advantage. However, I'm also one of those people that wants to be as well informed as I can be. And certainly during my process, I read a lot of books about adoption from another country, and certainly raising a child of a different race, because I wanted to be the best I could be for my child in those ways. And so, yeah, you have to do what you can do. And I think by sharing our stories, we make those things okay and more acceptable. And so we shouldn't be hiding our stories anymore. We should be celebrating them and
That's
sharing.
right, baby. And the more we share our stories, the more we realize that we're never alone.
Yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, namaste, sister. I still have the beautiful placard that you got me, remember, of namaste and the meaning. It's sitting right kind of behind me, right back there. And I look at it all the time.
Mine is in the other room.
Well, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for trusting me with your story. Thank you so much for trusting the process of being in the Soul to Sisterhood book. I'm so grateful to you, and I just look forward to what's next for us. What are we going to collaborate on?
For sure. I'm very honored to be in the book, and I'm grateful that you asked me. So thank you.
Namaste. Namaste. Thanks, honey.